Welcome to the flipped classroom on religions of salvation in classical India. Today we're going to cover Jainism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. First, we're going to talk about Jainism. The economic transition that India underwent during this time period, which is discussed in the four parts of the flipped classroom, had tremendous religious implications because some thinkers began to question the authority of the Brahmins, which are the highest caste in India, and the validity of the traditional religious beliefs. So there were many different groups of people who went away from more traditional concepts, and one of them was the Jains. They were inspired by this guy, Mahavira, who was their main teacher. He believed that everything in the universe possessed a soul and therefore practiced ahimsa. This is extreme non-violence to all other living things. While this ascetic lifestyle, basically living very, very well, simply, eating as little as possible, meditating as much as possible. The Jains also wear basically like a piece of cloth over their mouths and have a broom so that they sweep any bugs out of the way, so that they do not kill them by walking on them. So it's a pretty extreme lifestyle that really didn't make sense for a mass following. They definitely provided a challenge for Hinduism by refusing to recognize social castes. So that was a challenge to Hinduism. And they also have a very um, long-lasting footprint in that Gandhi and Martin Luther King used this principle of ahimsa in their movements in the 20th century. So the main religions that we need to go over are Buddhism and Hinduism. Buddhism starts with Siddhartha Gautama, and Siddhartha Gautama was a prince, and so he had a pretty sweet life. But eventually he made it out of his princely realm, and when he got out of it, he just saw suffering everywhere, and it was a total shock to him. So he renounced his life of luxury and became a monk, and practiced that life of asceticism. He meditated, he ate as little as possible, he thought about the human condition. For 49 days, he meditated under a Bodhi tree, and we'll see this in the video, to finally achieve enlightenment or moksha. And when he reached that, he got the title of Buddha, the Enlightened One. So the philosophy of Buddhism is first outlined in the first sermon, and this contains the Four Noble Truths, which is what Buddha arrived after sitting under the Bodhi tree, that all life is suffering. So life contains this suffering, and there is a way to get rid of that suffering, and that is by removing your desire. So you do that by following the Eightfold Path, a path of moderation, the middle way, right? And that becomes this wheel here. So, for example, if you're like me and you love to shop and you really want a pair of Paige jeans, right? But they're too expensive for you and you really suffer over this. You really want them, right? But the way to get rid of that is by removing your desire for the jeans. So you take that desire away and all of a sudden your life is better. And you do that by not desiring those things so much. So you would change your mind, you would change your intention and your understanding of how important that thing is, right? Is it really important that I have this new pair of jeans? No, I already have many pairs of jeans. Therefore, I do not need them. Buddhism was really appealing because, unlike Hinduism, you didn't have to depend on the highest caste, the Brahmins, and it didn't recognize caste or jati status. So you could reach enlightenment at whatever stage, right? Rather unlike in Hinduism, which we'll discuss, where you could not reach enlightenment at any stage. It believed in a philosophy of moderate consumption, not just being totally a pauper all the time. And so, therefore, it was really, really appealing to merchants because merchants couldn't have a ton of stuff. And because of this, it traveled along the Silk Roads into places like Afghanistan and over into places like China. It also used the vernacular, so it used common language. And nobody at this time, this was kind of like Latin, like people couldn't, Latin today, people couldn't really read Sanskrit very often. And partially because of the support of Ashoka, there was just tons of monasteries to practice Buddhism. And this led to more men and women, especially men, moving out of the gender role of being a husband. Ashoka really supported Buddhism after his personal conversion at the Battle of Kalinga. Um, and he supported it in his law code. He gave a lot of money to monasteries. He built a lot of monuments. And he supported missionaries. And he really helped to spread Buddhism in northern India. However, Buddhism, well, we'll talk about that in a second. There are two different types of Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism and Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism. In Theravada Buddhism, this earlier version of Buddhism, Buddha is not divine. Okay, he is a man. He has this philosophy, and it is followed. In Mahayana, which is practiced by more people and spread more easily, Buddha is considered divine. And there's also this institution of bodhisattvas or saints. This is similar to saints in Catholicism, where you would pray to certain bodhisattvas or meditate on certain bodhisattvas to become enlightened in that area. And many of the little Buddhas that you kind of see, those are representative of bodhisattvas. Next, we're going to get into Hinduism, and this is just going to be a very brief going over of Hinduism. It's not meant to be the end-all be-all. So, in Hinduism, the ultimate reality or God is Brahma or Brahman, and that is a single uniting force. The oldest text in Hinduism, the Vedas, describes this Brahman. You, yourself, your soul, your Atman, pursue this unity with Brahman. And your goal is to unite with it. How you do a yoga, which yoga can be, it's not like yoga traditional poses that we think of in the West, but you live a good life and do the duty of your caste to unite with Brahman. But these ideas are extremely abstract because Brahman is kind of like this universal soul, and when you die and escape the cycle of samsara, your soul disappears into this universal soul. It becomes a part of the universal soul. It's like a drop of water in the ocean. The ocean is the universal soul, and you are the drop of water. You are indistinguishable from it. That's a very abstract idea. And so many Indians needed a more concrete version of this. So the literally thousands of gods in Hinduism, are manifestations of the Brahman. And at least that's the way we think of that in the West. The Upanishads are teachings. This is the first text after the Vedas. And they're literally conversations with a teacher to learn about the principles of Hinduism. And then epics like the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, are more and the Mahabharata are stories that show the principles of Hinduism in action. Hinduism has a couple key terms. Brahman or Brahma is the universal soul. Samsara is the cycle of death and rebirth that you go through as you move up the castes or down the castes. Karma is what goes around comes around. It's living a good life. And if you do bad things, you will eventually go down in caste. Once you die, if you do good things, you'll go up. Dharma is your duty, and that is different for each caste. A warrior needs to be the best warrior. A priest needs to be the best priest. Those jobs don't necessarily overlap. And then we have moksha, the enlightenment or escape, and samsara, or enlightenment to escape samsara. You can only escape samsara in the highest varna or caste. Varna means color. There's an emphasis here then on meeting class obligations, which leads to social stability. There's also an emphasis on well-being and honesty, or artha, social and physical pleasure, kama, and salvation of the soul, moksha. Hinduism, this is very important, gradually replaces Buddhism. Buddhism almost dies out in India and becomes more popular again along the Silk Road route, but not necessarily in India itself. Hinduism is much stronger there, partially probably because the Guptas supported it so thoroughly. As part of the Hinduism, this caste system is still very present, and we'll talk about the complications of the caste system in class. If you think about the caste as going along with the person, the Brahmas are the head, the Kshatriyas are the arms, the Vaishyas are the legs, and the Sudras are the feet. And then outside of the caste system, technically not even part of Hinduism, not even Hindu, are the untouchables. That's why untouchables can eat meat, whereas most Hindus abstain from meat and are vegetarian. The untouchables were considered unclean or untouchable. Your karma could literally go down by touching them. They exist outside of the caste system, and they were given jobs like that other Hindus couldn't do because they were restricted by their religion. So cremating of dead bodies, handling of animal carcasses, cleaning up trash, bathrooms, etc. The caste system was officially abolished by the Indian government in 1949, but it still runs things today. So, for example, affirmative action in India is done by caste. It's mandated, or it's run by caste. And that is where we are going to stop for today. Thank you for listening and getting to the end of this. Hopefully you took careful notes in your spice charts.